picture this, it's 1516, and you're a young man standing in the freezing shadow of the Alps. You're surrounded by jagged peaks, snow that never melts, and soil so thin you couldn't grow a potato if your life depended on it. Which, by the way, it does. Your father has one cow. Your three brothers are eyeing that same cow. There's no gold in these mountains, no coal, no timber worth selling. The only thing Switzerland has in abundance is rocks and young men with nothing to lose. By every economic law, you should be fleeing to France or Germany to beg for work, but you don't. Because your canton just signed a contract, not for crops, not for trade, for you, your body, your willingness to kill. And that contract is about to make your tiny, frozen homeland the richest place on earth. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Switzerland didn't get rich by being neutral. They got rich by being useful to the most dangerous people in history. They became the world's vault, not because they were trustworthy, but because they were willing to hold anyone's money, no questions asked. Today, Switzerland's GDP per capita is over $92,000, higher than the United States, higher than Germany. Higher than almost every nation that actually has resources. They control 35% of the global oil trade despite producing 0 barrels. They hold trillions in private wealth despite being the size of Maryland. And here's the question that's going to haunt you by the end of this. Did Switzerland discover some brilliant economic cheat code, or did they just become the world's most successful money launderer? Stick around because the answer is way darker than a cuckoo clock. Let's rewind to the blood money. The part of Swiss history that gets conveniently left out of the tourism brochures. If you were a European king in the 1500s and you needed an army, you had two options. Conscript your own peasants who didn't want to fight, or hire the Swiss, who were so terrifyingly good at killing that they became a luxury brand of violence. The Swiss didn't invent war, but they did invent the military-industrial complex. They turned murder into a subscription service. The cantons, essentially Switzerland's states, would negotiate what were called capitulations with foreign monarchs. Think of it as a corporate contract. The King of France needs 20,000 men to crush the Austrians. No problem. Uri and Schwyz will provide the soldiers. You pay up front in gold, plus wages, plus pensions for the families. And the kicker, the canton takes a cut. This wasn't just some ragtag mercenary gig. This was industrialized violence. At the peak in the 18th century, over 50,000 Swiss men were fighting in foreign armies at any given time. That's 50,000 paychecks flowing back into a country that had virtually no other source of income. The French kings alone were paying Switzerland hundreds of thousands of livres annually, which in today's money would be tens of millions of dollars just for access to Swiss pike formations. And here's where the compounding starts. The aristocratic Swiss families who organized these contracts, they weren't just sending poor farmers off to die. They were taking their cut and investing it, lending it back to the same kings who hired them, financing the wars their own soldiers were fighting in. It's the most brilliant and the most disgusting business model in history. You export death, import gold, and then lend that gold back to the people buying your deaths. By the time Switzerland officially declared neutrality in 1815, they weren't starting from zero. They were sitting on centuries of war profits, and those families who made fortunes off blood became the backbone of what we now call Swiss private banking. Neutrality wasn't a moral stance, it was a rebrand. But having a pile of gold isn't enough. You need the world to trust you with their gold. And that's where the second pillar comes in, the invention of silence as a product. Let's jump to 1934. Europe is a mess. The Great Depression has gutted economies. In France, the government is hunting down tax dodgers. In Germany, the Nazis are hunting down Jews, political enemies, and anyone who might have money they want. Swiss banks are caught in the middle. French authorities raid a Swiss bank office in Paris and find a list of over 2,000 wealthy French citizens hiding money in Geneva. Meanwhile, the Gestapo is sending spies into Zurich, trying to bribe tellers into revealing which German citizens have Swiss accounts so they can be arrested, or worse. Switzerland is facing an existential question. Do we comply with foreign governments and lose all our clients, or do we protect our clients and risk diplomatic war? They chose option 3. They made secrecy the law. In 1934, Switzerland passed the Federal Banking Act. Article 47 made it a criminal offense, not a civil one, criminal for any banker to reveal the identity of a client. You could go to prison for 3 years just for whispering a name. This was revolutionary. In every other country, if you violated bank-client confidentiality, you got sued. In Switzerland, you got a criminal record. Overnight, Switzerland became the only country on earth where you could hide money and the law would protect you. Even from foreign governments. Now you know what happened next, World War II. And Switzerland, sitting right in the middle of Nazi-occupied Europe, stayed neutral. But neutral doesn't mean inactive, it means trading with everyone. The Reichsbank, Nazi Germany's central bank, looted gold from the national reserves of Belgium, the Netherlands, and from the victims of the Holocaust. They melted down wedding rings, dental fillings, anything, and where did that gold go? To Switzerland. The Swiss National Bank and private Swiss banks accepted roughly $440 million in Nazi gold. Equivalent to over $4 billion today. They exchanged it for Swiss francs, which Germany used to buy tungsten, steel, and war materials. 85% of all gold traded by Nazi Germany went through Switzerland. After the war, Switzerland hid behind neutrality. They said, "We were just doing business. We didn't take sides." It wasn't until the 1990s, after massive international pressure and the threat of sanctions, that Swiss banks agreed to a settlement. $1.25 billion for Holocaust survivors, but by then, the money had already done its job. It had turned Switzerland into the world's vault, because here's the genius, that flood of foreign capital, whether from Jews, Nazis, or dictators. All of it sat in Swiss banks earning interest, and Swiss banks used that capital to lend to Swiss companies at incredibly low rates. That's how Switzerland funded its next move, precision manufacturing. If you're landlocked and surrounded by mountains, shipping is your enemy. You can't compete with Britain making locomotives or Germany making steel, because the cost of dragging heavy products over the Alps will bankrupt you. So Switzerland realized, we can't compete on weight, we have to compete on value per gram, enter the watch industry. But here's the origin story most people don't know. In the 1500s, John Calvin banned jewelry in Geneva. He said it was sinful and flashy. So all the jewelers in the city panicked. They had tools, they had skills, but no market. Then someone said, what if we make tiny machines that tell time? Watches weren't jewelry, they were tools. Loophole. Fast forward to today, and Swiss watch exports are worth over $25 billion a year. Rolex alone makes an estimated $10 billion annually. But the real money isn't in the watches you see in a store window. It's in the machines that make the machines. Switzerland dominates the market for ultra-precision machine tools. If Apple wants to mill an iPhone casing to a tolerance of 1 micron, they're buying that machine from Switzerland. If a pharmaceutical company needs a laser to cut microdoses of a drug, Swiss-made, Switzerland doesn't try to make everything. They make the one component that if it breaks, the whole system fails. That's pricing power. That's monopoly without the baggage. But we're not done, because the most profitable and most controversial Swiss industry is pharma. Let's talk about Novartis and Roche. These two companies are based in Basel, a city on the Rhine River bordering France and Germany. Together, they generate over $115 billion in revenue annually. But here's the uncomfortable origin story. In the 1800s, Germany was the world leader in chemistry. They invented synthetic dyes, the stuff that made your clothes vibrant colors. German companies like BASF held strict patents on these formulas. But Switzerland didn't have patent laws until 1907, so Swiss entrepreneurs would literally walk across the border. Study the German patents, memorize the formulas, walk back to Basel, and start producing the exact same dyes without paying a cent for research and development. They were pirates, the Germans were furious. They called Switzerland a state of robbers. But by the time Switzerland finally introduced patent laws in 1907, guess who wrote them? The Swiss chemical industry. And the law conveniently protected their new inventions while ignoring all the stuff they'd already stolen. Once they had the capital from the dye business, they pivoted into pharmaceuticals because the chemistry is almost identical. Blue dye becomes antiseptic, chemical separation becomes drug synthesis. Today, Basel is the biotech capital of Europe, but it's built on intellectual property theft and a willingness to prioritize profit over everything else. In 1986, a Sandoz warehouse in Basel caught fire. Firefighters doused it with water, which mixed with over 1,000 tons of pesticides and mercury. The toxic slurry flowed into the Rhine River, turning it red and killing nearly all aquatic life for hundreds of kilometers. It was an ecological Chernobyl. Did it stop them? No. They paid the fines, rebranded, merged, and became even bigger. Because here's the thing about pharmaceuticals, they're recession-proof. When the economy crashes, people stop buying Rolexes. But they don't stop buying cancer drugs. Pharma is Switzerland's hedge against the world burning down. Now let's talk about the fifth pillar, and this one is absolutely wild. Switzerland has no oil wells, no copper mines, no farms producing grain at scale. Yet 35% of the world's oil, 60% of the world's metals, and 50% of the world's grain are traded through Switzerland. How? By becoming the broker for the planet's resources. This empire was built by one man, Mark Rich. In the 1970s, the oil market was controlled by the Seven Sisters, giant companies like Exxon and Shell. Mark Rich realized that if he could cut deals directly with the governments and dictators who own the oil, he could bypass the big companies and create a spot market. He set up shop in Zug, a small Swiss town, because the corporate tax rate was insanely low, around 8 to 10%, and because the Swiss government didn't care who he did business with. While the rest of the world had sanctions on apartheid South Africa, Mark Rich was selling them oil. Had hostages in Iran, Mark Rich was buying Iranian crude. He traded with Castro's Cuba. He traded with the Soviet Union. He became the most wanted white-collar fugitive in FBI history, indicted him on 65 criminal counts. But Switzerland refused to extradite him because under Swiss law, tax evasion wasn't a crime and violating foreign sanctions wasn't illegal. Mark Rich lived comfortably in his lakeside villa until Bill Clinton controversially pardoned him on his last day in office. But the model he built lives on. Mark Rich's company became Glencore. Today, firms like Glencore, Vitol, Trafigura, Gunvor, and Mercuria, all based in Switzerland, control more than 30% of global oil trade. They handle over $2 trillion in transactions every year. They don't drill, they don't refine, they just move paper. Arbitrage prices and take the spread. When a poor country like Chad needs cash, they don't go to the World Bank anymore. They go to a trader in Geneva who says, "Sure, here's $500 million. In exchange, we get the rights to all your oil for the next 5 years. It's a payday loan for entire nations." And Switzerland takes the cut without ever touching a drill. This is extraction without colonization. It's brilliance and it's predatory all at once. But here's the thing, you can't be the world's piggy bank if people think someone can just smash the piggy bank. That's where the sixth pillar comes in, the porcupine strategy. During World War II, Switzerland was completely surrounded by the Axis powers. Hitler hated Switzerland. He called it a pimple on the face of Europe. He even had an invasion plan, Operation Tannenbaum. But he never executed it. Why? Because Switzerland made it clear that the cost of invasion would be higher than the reward. They developed the National Redoubt. The plan was simple. If Germany invaded, the Swiss army would retreat into the high Alps. They had hollowed out entire mountains, building underground fortresses, hospitals, ammunition depots, even hydroelectric plants. They rigged every major bridge, tunnel, and rail line with explosives. At the push of a button, Switzerland would cut itself off from Europe and trap any invading army in the valleys, where they'd be picked off by snipers. They essentially held their own country hostage. If you invade, we destroy everything and you get nothing. This mentality never ended. Until very recently, every Swiss home was required to have a nuclear fallout shelter. Switzerland has enough bunker space to house 114% of its population. If nuclear war breaks out tomorrow, the entire country goes underground and survives. Every Swiss male is conscripted. After boot camp, they take their assault rifle home. There are hundreds of thousands of fully automatic rifles sitting in Swiss closets right now. And yet, Switzerland has one of the lowest crime rates in the world. This isn't pacifism. This is weaponized paranoia. And it has a financial side effect, the safe haven premium. When investors panic, when there's a financial crisis, a war, a pandemic, they sell everything and buy Swiss francs, because the Swiss franc isn't just a currency, it's a share in a fortress. This demand makes the franc incredibly strong. So strong, in fact, that Switzerland has been able to charge negative interest rates. People were so desperate to park their money in Switzerland that they paid Switzerland to hold it. Let that sink in. The world pays Switzerland to keep their money safe. That is the ultimate flex. But nothing lasts forever, and recently, the fortress has started to crack. In March 2023, Credit Suisse, one of the two pillars of Swiss banking, collapsed. It was humiliating. The bank had been involved in scandal after scandal, spying on employees, laundering money for drug cartels, losing billions on risky bets. Confidence evaporated. The Swiss government had to force a shotgun wedding with UBS to prevent a total meltdown. It proved that even Swiss banks aren't invincible, and the secrecy, it's not what it used to be. Since around 2018, Switzerland has been forced to share account data with other countries under automatic exchange of information agreements. If you're an American trying to hide money in Zurich today, the IRS will know. The dirty money is moving. It's going to Dubai, it's going to Singapore, it's going into crypto. But the Swiss aren't sitting still, they're pivoting. Zug is now called Crypto Valley. Switzerland is positioning itself as the regulatory capital of blockchain. They're saying, okay, if we can't hide your fiat currency anymore, we'll help you institutionalize your Bitcoin. They're adapting, just like they went from mercenaries to bankers. They're now going from old money vault to new tech hub. So here's the final question, the one I teased at the beginning. How did Switzerland get so rich? They realized that the most valuable resource in the world isn't oil, gold, or land. It's trust. But not moral trust, transactional trust. The trust that says, I will hold your money, no matter where it came from. And I will never tell. Switzerland didn't get rich by being good. They got rich by being useful to the powerful. They didn't take sides. They took everyone's money. They became the world's middleman, and they charged a premium for discretion. We love to criticize Switzerland. We call them morally bankrupt. We say they enabled Nazis, dictators, and drug lords. And we're right, but here's the uncomfortable truth. Who gave them that money? We did. Our governments, our corporations, our elites. Switzerland didn't create the demand for secrecy. They just supplied it. They held up a mirror to the world and said, this is what you really want. A place where money matters more than morality, a place where business is business, and the world said yes. So the next time you see a picture of a pristine Swiss lake or a charming alpine village, just remember that beauty was paid for by 5 centuries of ruthless, brilliant, uncompromising capitalism. Switzerland took a frozen wasteland with no resources and turned it into a utopia by doing the jobs no one else wanted to admit they needed. They didn't get rich by luck. They got rich by being indispensable to the people who run the world. And that, more than any gold bar or watch movement, is the real Swiss secret.